you've seen those what your beverage container says about you things on TikTok, and a blender bottle tells you to stay away. I promise I'm not nearly as intense as this might lead you to believe. I just don't have a lot of friends. All right. You're at 12:40, so let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, I want to say thank you all for coming in. I'm glad that you all are here for our first real day in the class. I kind of feel like Charlie Brown with the football, right? Where like we think it's going to be the first day, and then the football gets snatched away at the last second, and literally goes sliding on the ice. But we're here. We are getting rolling. And again, as I emphasized over email, it's really important to me that we treat this as the first day, right? I'm not going to rant too much about it, but I'm like frustrated by people who are already assigning homework and like creating optional Zoom meetings for last week. Like, this is the start of the semester, right? A lot of you all had the power out. There's been a lot of treacherous conditions on campus. I'm glad things seem to be getting a little bit better, and I hope that you all enjoyed the extended break. I don't want to feel rushed into the beginning of the semester. This is just where we're starting from. So, missed a couple days, we'll live. We'll still have a really great time this semester, and I'm really glad to have you all here in the course. So, speaking of your general health and well-being, I wanted to start out our class by sharing a clip that is the U.S. Surgeon General, who issued a health advisory regarding the ways in which teenagers and young adults find themselves using social media. How many of you all heard about this advisory or familiar with it before? Okay, a couple of you, maybe a little bit. So we're going to be looking at an interview with the U.S. Surgeon General. And as you all are watching this interview, what I want you to pay attention to is the ways in which we see this conversation happening about social media. What assumptions are being made about media's impact, its effect on children and teenagers, what suggestions are being given about policies or actions that can be taken against it, right? What are you noticing? Do you find yourself agreeing or disagreeing with some of the things that are being said? So we'll take a look at it, and we'll take some time to discuss your thoughts on some of these issues together as a group before we get rolling.
New advisory, you said so far there's been barriers to our understanding of the full health impacts of social media. What do you mean by that, and what do you want to see changed?
Well, Trevor, I hear from researchers all across the country that they're having a hard time getting access to information, to data from technology companies that speaks to the health impact of social media platforms on our young people. And we need that data to fully understand just how much people are affected, the particular groups that are most impacted by social media, and to understand whether the solutions that technology companies and others are putting in place actually help. And the reason we're talking about this, Trevor, is because we're in the middle of a youth mental health crisis in America. I said before that this is the defining public health challenge of our time. And I'm very concerned that social media has become an important contributor to the pain and the struggles that many of our young people are facing. When I talk to parents across the country, they share these concerns, and they also ask me, is social media safe for our kids? And we issued an advisory today on social media and youth mental health because the evidence, when we looked at all the publicly available evidence, we do not have clear data and support, research support to tell us, in fact, that social media is sufficiently safe for our kids. What we do have is growing evidence that tells us that social media use is associated with harm. And so that is a great concern for me as Surgeon General, as a doctor, as a father of two young kids. And in the advisory, I lay out steps that we have to take as society, technology companies, policymakers, researchers, and others, so that we can ultimately help our kids.
I want to talk a little bit about the data that we found so far. And again, I know that the research into social media and its mental health impact is still pretty early in its infancy, given how new it is. But I mean, according to your warning, 95% of teens, 40% of children ages 8 through 12 are using social media on average 3.5 hours a day, and 3 hours plus use, it doubles your risk of depression and anxiety, which sounds astoundingly worrying. I mean, is that—
It is worrying.
Yeah, I mean, is that even worse than people were expecting? I mean, I know you're asked all the time by parents, is this bad? That sure seems to me like it almost is openly bad.
Yeah, well, this is deeply concerning, and in addition to that data point, we also know that half of kids who are using social media say that it makes them feel worse about their body image. We know that 1 in 3 adolescents are staying up past midnight on weekdays using screens, and that's predominantly time on social media. And so, however you look at it, my worry is that for many kids, not for all kids, but for many kids, social media is chipping away at their self-esteem. It's taking time away from activities that are critical for health and development, like sleep, but also in-person interaction, physical activity. But it's also exposing them to harmful content. So many children are exposed to violence, to sexual content, to harassment and bullying on social media. And so this is a point of real concern. And look, what we've got to do here is take a safety-first approach. We've got to make sure these platforms are actually safe for our kids, the way we do with other products that children use, whether it's medications, cars, car seats, infant formula. We make sure that these are safe so that parents have the support that they need to make the best decisions for their kids. And right now, I'll tell you, the entire burden of managing social media is falling on the shoulder of parents and kids. And that is simply not right. We've got to have their backs. We've got to support them. And that's why mission is advisory. So call our country not only to attention about the potential harms with social media, but also to call our country to action to address this important issue.
Okay. So, by the way, this is the report that came out from U.S. Surgeon General and the advisory report that highlights many of the data points that were brought up in this interview. For example, 95% of teenagers and 40% of children ages 8 to 12 who utilize social media. Impacts from those surveyed on the ways in which social media usage had an impact on body image and made people feel worse about their body image. Exposure to hate-based content, content related to self-harm, discussion about addiction, and so forth. Now, you saw that interview, you saw that report. Don't worry, this class is not a semester of me like bashing and talking about how bad social media is. I study it. I think it can be very much a force for good. However, right, we see these kinds of reports and areas of discussion come up a lot, right? What is social media doing to us? Is it melting our brains? Is it a way that we're able to connect and relate to each other, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? But I highlight this to show the kind of social, cultural, and political discourse and issues that are very much undergirding how we think about media and the ways in which media is used to create and maintain those meaningful relationships in our lives. So what I would like you to do, and I know that we've got some rather rigid tables over here, is to find some folks to talk to in the class, perhaps a small group of people that are sitting near you. And what I would like you all to do is to talk about and share your thoughts on the following question. Do you all agree with Dr. Murthy, the U.S. Surgeon General, about social media among young people contributing to the defining public health challenge of our time? Why or why not? Where do you find yourself falling on this question? And any other things that you've noticed from that interview, or more generally, these points of discourse about social media use among children and teenagers. To take some time to discuss your thoughts on this clip that we shared and your thoughts on social media use, and we'll come together to talk about these points in the class in just a little bit. Your conversation. Share. This conversation is great. It's almost like y'all got bored with all the stuff in your dorms and stuff. Okay, so what I would like us to do now is I'm going to have us go around to the different groups. As we're starting, I would like each person within the group to introduce yourself to the class. Share your name. If you'd like to disclose pronouns, you can do that too. Your year in school and majors that you have declared in or you're thinking about or starting to explore. Once everybody in your group has had the chance to introduce themselves, I'm going to have your representative share your thoughts in reaction to that video clip and or more general thoughts about how we think about social media use among young people today. So let's start toward the back on this side over here.
Hi, I'm Lyra. I'm a sophomore and a rhetoric and media studies major. I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Ribs. I use any pronouns. I'm a sophomore English.
What are some of y'all's thoughts on this question and more generally about what you noticed?
Well, we talked a little bit about, well, neither of us actually really use much in the way of algorithmic social media. Neither of us are on Twitter, Instagram, any of that. So we couldn't speak as much to that sort of thing. But we sort of talked about how the definition of mental health crisis in general can be a little bit flawed, because a lot of the time when people talk about mental health crises, they talk about, oh, what can be done so that there is no mental health crisis. But no matter what, there's always going to be neurodivergent people and people with mental illness.
Yes.
And rather than taking preventative measures, I mean, of course, more regulation for social media is probably going to be a good thing. But also, the American mental health care system is an absolute disaster. So why not work on that instead?
Yeah. Lyra, this is a really great starting point in thinking about these questions and how we engage in these questions, right? You're hitting on ways that we think about the medical model of disability that says there is a problem, that is a person's fault, they need to fix it. But as you highlight, right, in the context of mental health and neurodiversity, this is not about curing or fixing a person who lives with a variety of experiences that they might define in their own terms, many ways in their lives. That doesn't just go away and that isn't just fixed. So what does it mean to individualize and assign individual responsibility to the use of social media among children, right? Like that is one of the challenges of how this interview is rhetorically positioning the audience and how we are asked to interpret and understand this issue. I think this does a great job of getting us thinking about and starting to explore many of these questions. Let's move on down the line over here.
My name is Mikey. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a junior and an art.
Next.
My name is Matt. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. I'm a sophomore and an art.
Thanks.
My name's Josie. I'm a sophomore and I'm RHMS major and the pronouns are she, her.
My name's Lauren. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a sophomore art.
My name's Paul. I use he, him pronouns and sophomore and I'm considering.
Cool. Right. So what do you all think?
We kind of brushed on the difference between correlation and causation, and the fact that, you know, this generation, obviously, like how like widespread and accessible and like prolific social media is, does contribute to mental health crisis, but we're also seeing like destigmatization of mental health. More people are getting diagnosed. So there's a big difference between you know, firsthand accounts of teens and young people talking about how social media affects their mental health. But I think there's definitely like overgeneralization. And yeah, as mentioned before, like better healthcare for mental health is definitely the way to go, and we should be keeping up with the times and not discouraging social media use altogether, because it's not realistic.
Yeah, Laura, right?
Lauren.
Yeah. Yeah, so I really like the points that you all are hitting on in this group. Again, this question of correlation versus causation, right? Y'all have been through the ringer in the context of COVID-19, many of the challenges that we've experienced over these past several years, right? The challenges of climate crisis, like, you know, I don't know about y'all, but I'm exhausted. I'm not ready for the 2024 presidential election. That just makes me sigh very loudly, right? Like, there is all of that, and there's also, as you all mentioned, the idea of destigmatization. One thing that we know is that in the context of a lot of disability and diagnosis, that the diagnostic criteria and doctors, right, have oftentimes used racial and gender stereotypes and who gets access to a diagnosis, right? So when we start to see, oh no, 1 in 64 children diagnosed as autistic, well, that's because like criteria has become more racially and gender inclusive. It's not about an epidemic or crisis, and even if that was necessarily a bad thing, right? As much as it is about understanding and engaging with those questions of stigma and how we think about issues pertaining to mental health. So really enjoy y'all's points here as well. Let's keep on moving down over here.
I'm Mira. My friends are she, her, sophomore. Please write up.
My name is Garrett. I'm also a sophomore, and my major is RHMS. My name is Taj. I use he, him pronouns.
What are you all's thoughts on some of these points of discussion and what you know?
Yeah, so we were talking about how we definitely agree with Dr. Murphy. And we were talking about COVID-19 most of the time and how it like just being on Zoom and how all the parents kind of were forced to, I guess, throw media at their children and, they couldn't really go outside and hang out with other kids. So it's kind of like these kids are growing up with, more media than what the older generations are used to. And we talked about violence too, and how like it's just kind of being desensitized because kids are just getting so used to seeing it on Instagram and Twitter, just so much violence and stuff. And that's pretty much it.
So, right, as you all point out, in the context of COVID-19, there's been a lot of challenges raised about, while we've seen shifts online and being able to engage in those mediated spaces, right, like many things got drastically accelerated and changed. People needed to move over Zoom. I was there, right? I was teaching 5 classes a semester all on Zoom. It was awful, kept us from dying, right? But it was awful and it was a challenge. And we're actually going to be reading a piece in just a little bit in the class that gets at the ideas of Zoom fatigue and why like Zoom meetings and our experience with those has been such an exhausting experience for us from an interpersonal communication perspective. But as you're getting on, right, those challenges of how we're engaging online and how that has changed us in a longer term capacity. Again, it kept us safe, but it also, right, raised a lot of new challenges for us. And as you point out, right, issues of violence, how violence is represented in media, this is something that we definitely see in a lot of new capacities. This has been an area that's been discussed for a very long time, right? Like fears of video games causing violence, concerns like if you're familiar with Albert Bandura and the Bobo dolls, where kids see the dolls being beat up on TV, and then like the theory is that they're conditioned to hit the dolls themselves because of that exposure. Those questions of how we're engaging in media content and the material impacts and media effects that it has, also really important questions that we're going to be grappling at and getting at in this class too. Let's keep on moving down here.
I'm Andy. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a sophomore.
I'm Ashir. I'm also a sophomore and also RHMS.
I'm Lily. I use she, her pronouns.
Our group didn't really come to like a concrete conclusion about whether we disagree or agree with Dr. Murphy, but we did talk about how social media as a term is used and how we kind of singularly define it. We don't really talk about the positives of social media. We only really focus on the negatives and how social media is used in one way. We don't really talk about how it can be used in multiple ways. It was kind of our main thing.
Yeah. So the sophomore RHMS major quarter, I feel like we all have some really good observations, right? This question of defining what makes something social media, that's a question that we'll be getting at and exploring, especially as we look at a lot of new avenues and ways in which social media is happening, right? I have some colleagues, not in this department, but some folks who are like, I don't know what a TikTok is. I am not, never going to create one. I'm never going to get on there. And I keep telling them, I'm like, you study communication, you study rhetoric, you study media. Like, I'm going to try to go on there. You know, maybe I'll be like making millennial cringe content on TikTok, whatever. But like, it's our job to study and understand these things that they're changing and evolving, right? To engage with these new forms of communication and what they mean, right? And these kind of generational divides and how they shape our communication. I also like this idea that you point out, again, coming from this example from Dr. Murthy, that a lot of the ways social media is talked about is in a very negative capacity, when we know that social media also has the ability to build connections with people, to be involved in the idea of identity exploration, how do we come to understand ourselves? Maybe we find ourselves exposed to content from people that we relate to let us explore and understand our identities better, right? Social media can be a tool for social change, right? We saw this in the context of the Arab Spring, of Black Lives Matter, right? We know that social media is not this end-all be-all negative thing, but we also know that the internet is where nuance goes to die. So these questions of how we frame and talk about social media are ones that we'll be grappling with as well. So let's keep on moving down to this set of folks over here.
Hi, my name is Jeremiah. I used to be him. I'm a psychology major. I'm a junior.
Yeah, my name is Trey. I'm a senior, rhetoric major, UCA.
I'm a person, junior, he's in Bruno. I'm a RHMS major.
I'm Josephine, I usually I am a junior, and I'm a second RHMS major. Thanks. I'm very
What are y'all's thoughts?
Okay, so our group agreed with Dr. Lindsay, and we spent less time discussing on, the mental health crisis of like the description of like cognitive anxiety and depression. There is a correlation, but we also spoke about other issues we have with social media and how that contributes to like their general health, in terms of like how much they participate in like online and offline behaviors, and especially with the younger generation when they're like especially at least in Instagram, for example, there was like a shift between just, you know, sending pictures of yourself versus like more like advertisements and monetization, as well as like the idea of social acceptance.
Yeah. So really important and good questions. We're going to be spending a week in the class looking at how face-to-face and like online communication connect and relate to each other. What does it mean to have the interplay of those things happening? Because it's a fascinating area, right? What does it mean to like have a friend and now you're suddenly long distance, right? And you're like sending Snapchats to each other, or like, I like the discourse about doing your friend homework, where like a friend sends TikToks that reminded you of them, and like, you know, you're responding to each other's content and posts. Like, there's that element. And then, as you all mentioned, like the changes in the norms and behavior on social media, like how Instagram, we see a lot of influencers in advertising and sort of shifts in how that representation is happening. We'll be looking at some of those questions and issues as well. But again, it's speaking to that very shifting environment, how we engage more generally in media. Let's move up here to the second round.
I'm Madeline, they she pronouns, and I am a sophomore. I'm Charlize, I'm also a sophomore, rhetoric and media major, and I use she her pronouns. I'm Tallulah, also a sophomore, rhetoric and media major, I use she her pronouns. I'm also the representative. We kind of talked about a couple things, a lot of things, the language too being maybe a little problematic in terms of like young people.
Yeah.
That is, young is such a broad word, like term. And I do think that there's different like stages of adolescence we were talking about, that you're more vulnerable or susceptible to social media affecting your mental health. Because we were talking about how we're not confident that we can say that about college age people, that it's that harmful. But we also talked about how in middle school we could see this being something that affects.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think this is an important point, right? Because referring to young people as this broad collective, that in many ways is also whitewashing a lot of the experiences of people in the context of the digital divide, people who might come in with different levels of media literacy, exposure, and understanding of how things work, people at different kind of developmental stages, right, and processes, international and intercultural perspectives. So it's very broad swath of the young people, right? We see this used as an explicit rhetorical tactic, right? We see this a lot, like, think about the children. What about the children? Protect the children, right? Like that is used as this very common refrain to mobilize people toward political end. So this question of what we mean when we're referring to young people as a broad group, that's something we've got to critique and pick apart. We'll be spending some time kind of getting at these problems of how we define in a very broad context what it means to be a young person engaging in technology, media, and so forth. Over here.
I'm Iz, I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a junior environmental studies major and community studies minor.
I'm Joelle, she, her pronouns, and senior English major, creative writing concentration.
Awesome.
I'm Sarah, and she, her pronouns. I'm a sophomore and I'm majoring in computer art and minor in art. Awesome. So our group talked about how we agree with Dr. Murphy specifically in terms of not just social media use in general, but unregulated social media use, and how a lot of social media have algorithms that are designed to keep you kind of trapped there, for lack of a better word. And also, we talked about how using social media for a really long period of time kind of stops you from doing other things that are good for your mental health. Like when you're on your phone for a really long time, you're not sleeping, you're not exercising, you're not having a face-to-face interaction, you're not doing really anything creative usually. So like, and those are a lot of things that improve mental health, and it kind of like sucks up the time and attention that you would spend doing those things. So
yeah. Case in point, yesterday, one of my friends sent me a TikTok that was a spider jump scare. I hate spiders. Like, I'm one of those, like, I understand their importance and value to the ecosystem. I'm not gonna squash them. I'm gonna like gingerly put them in a glass and try to, like, the glass that I put them in, it's gone. Like, there's no hope of that glass anymore. But so she sent me one of those like spider jumping out at you, and I freaked out. And then she complained after that because she was like, well, now that I sent it to you, and the algorithm saw that I sent it to you, now I just keep getting them. And now when I go to check TikTok in the future, I don't know if the one that I see next is a real thing or is another spider jump scare, because like it could be anything, it's a landmine. So, you know, just desserts, but right, the idea of being trapped in the algorithm, trapped in the kind of content. We're also going to be getting at the idea of algorithmic bias and discrimination that comes in algorithms too. What happens when you search for the experiences and perspectives of people of color, right? Disproportionately, you see stereotypes in how those representations are happening online. Algorithms, of course, with a lot of concerns for how we're engaging in media and the feeling of being trapped in a bubble. And this question of how this does connect face-to-face as well is something we'll be getting to. And let's move up to the front here on this side.
My name is Elio. I'm an econ and American Media Double major and some.
Awesome.
my name's Ella. I'm a junior. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm RHMS major. My name's Sophia. I'm she, her pronouns. I'm a sophomore and then also.
And then we talked about more about like younger children, especially with parenting, and how it seems to be like those kids just grow up with iPads or things like that now, and the problem behind that. And then we also touched on like the rhetoric of just like having like a social media addiction and using that word. Yeah, things like that.
How did you all come down on feeling about the language of it? Do you feel like it's appropriate? Maybe it has some problems? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the correlation has a lot to do with more of just like substance, and social media is a substance. I feel like such young people or generations use it, and it can be problematic for the older people to understand.
Yeah. yeah, it's a challenge, right, to understand how like that language, right? We see addiction being replied to and used in a lot of contexts, like talking about video game addiction, talking about like, I don't know, like a grandparent who's addicted to Bejeweled Lips, right? Like the language of addiction, like there's ways that it's helpful, but also ways that sometimes it feels misappropriated. What do we make of that intentional choice to use that language? Well, find out more in RHMS, right? So, and then this experience, like seeing a baby who's holding an iPad, right? Or like, seeing a young kid and they're like, watching Bluey, right? Like those experiences of seeing that exposure to media from a young age, very different world. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, but you're growing up plugged in, and like each class that I teach is more and more, that is more and more the case. It's growing up at school. Over here.
My name is Bodie. I'm a junior, rhetoric and media. Please.
I'm Molly, I'm a sophomore in rhetoric media.
I'm Matt. I see him. I'm a rhetoric media studies English major, and
My name is Julian. I'm a freshman, even pronouns, and I'm an IA or RHMS major.
Cool. Okay. If there's ambiguity about your majors and like what standing you are, I get it. What do you all?
so we talked about a lot of the stuff everybody's mentioned already, but we especially talked about how generations grow up with different levels of like technology in the era that we're living in. So when I was younger, I'd like stay up playing my DS, and
What games?
that.
What games?
Oh, so many. Like I had the LMC game that they made that was really bad, and I also had the Wally one, and I had a bunch of Pokemon,
Nice.
and Mario Kart. Oh my gosh, I also had a Game Boy Advance. Regardless, though, we have technology, and it's handheld, or even a book and a flashlight. Well, like, this can go all the way back. You can have a book in it, and you can be up all night, and it's bad because like not only is it bad for your mental health now with media, because like you're not interacting with a game or fantasy anymore, you're interacting with real life and other people's real lives. But it's also bad because we know now medically that blue light is going to lead to a higher risk of brain cancer. So you have technology invading the lives of not only like children with really malleable brains and mindsets, but like once you're online and your synapses are getting fired and interacted with, you're going to think about this stuff that you see on social media regardless of your age. So it's going to impact you and come into your daily life. And it's going to be good and it's going to be bad. And then we also talked about, we talked about like the, going back to like the Bluey thing and kids growing up with technology. I mentioned like, I don't know who else knows a lot about YouTube Kids, but it's very poorly moderated. And moderation on social media is what makes or breaks your experience with it. Because what you see and what you don't see are equally important.
Yeah. So this question of the challenge, moderating a policy of regulation of media, including social media, that's a big one, right? And that's one that I don't think that the folks interviewed had much of a great answer to, because there are a lot of these challenges, like what content's posted online, right? Like people going on and like doxing or like posting like really inappropriate stuff. Like there was that in the context of COVID, right? There was like people who would like randomly pop up in Zoom meetings and like, flash people in the entire group, like stuff like that, right? So there's these challenges as you're highlighting. And also some of the challenges you're bringing up about some of the material and, results and evidence-based things that we're seeing on impact of our well-being and health, right? Like, we rock the blue light filters because we know the risks that are posed when we plug in and engage. So really like those points of discussion you all brought in too. I think I got to everybody. Is there anybody who did not have the chance to introduce themselves? Awesome. So I really enjoy this discussion, and I do think there's also a lot of points of disagreement, right? On whether or not we see social media as good, bad, somewhere in between. It's not linear, right? You're not thinking it's all good, all bad. But these questions, what does media do? How can we engage with media for good, for ill? How does it impact our social connections with other people? What does it mean for young people? What does it mean for college students, right? What does it mean across all of these different phases and experiences of life? these are questions that we find ourselves really interested in RHMS. So, you know, whether you are a sophomore RHMS major, as I've learned many of you are, or you're majoring in something else, regardless of where you're coming from, right? This course is designed to be accessible for folks. If it's your very first RHMS course, or it's like your 7th or 8th, or you stuck around past my rhetorical criticism course right before this one, right? We're going to be tackling and looking at lots of these questions and topics that many of you all have brought up, and using readings, examples, applications to get at these questions in more detail. We're going to disagree, and we're going to have a lot of ideas and perspectives about media and how it's used in the context of our relationships. That's part of what makes this class really exciting and interesting. So, some of the questions that we are exploring, but are not limited to in this class, that hit on some of the points that you all brought up in your own discussion. First of all, how do media shape our developing identities and self-concept, right? As we are growing up with iPads, with algorithmically targeted content, right? We're seeing relatable content, we're seeing people similar to us, perhaps there are influencers that we look up to and see as important. What does that mean for how we come to understand and engage with those things? One thing I find really interesting is the use of avatars and things like video games as a means of identity development and exploration. We're going to be looking at a piece that gets at that and how people explore, particularly non-cisgender perspectives, explore and develop identities through using various characters, right? I know a lot of queer folks who are having a blast with Baldur's Gate 3. Secondarily, what does it mean to network and participate in online culture? What does it mean to be involved in and participate in culture? Or what does it mean to choose not to do that? What decisions are we making and what guides those decisions about our media content that we are or are not involved in? And even if we're not choosing to be on social media, right, we know it's going to have an impact and influence our lives, right? As we know from the last few years, Trump posted a tweet and national level cabinet member is getting fired, or something significant is happening, right? Or Twitter diplomacy. So these questions about how media, regardless of whether or not we use it, is impacting our lives, these are questions that we'll get at as well. How does interpersonal media challenge the boundaries of humanness? What does it mean to be human, right? What does it mean when we have algorithms that are developing and trying to posthumously create like the personalities and behavior of people, right? We saw this like a decade ago when they tried to like create a hologram of Tupac to perform, but we're seeing more recent challenges and like how this very uncanny, concerning, and ethically challenging terrain of using and reconstruction of voices, perspectives. We saw this in the context of SAG-AFTRA strike, how those factors are shaping our lives. How does interpersonal media improve or exacerbate our social disparities? Again, looking at inequities and divides and how media might be used and its impact on our own lives. These are some of the many questions that we're going to be looking at and exploring over the course of the semester. So, the goals here in RHMS 270. First of all, we want to describe and understand how interpersonal communication and media studies connect in our day-to-day relationships. So interpersonal media is sort of this hybrid of two different parts that I think come together in a really interesting way. Interpersonal communication is meaningful communication typically done between two people. So a lot of departments have like an interpersonal communication class. When I was at Eastern Oregon, that was kind of our like intro class, was interpersonal communication. But we also know, many of you might know, particularly from taking a class from Drs. Conan or Seebach, that media studies is this rich, multifaceted way of understanding culture, participatory culture, online culture, film, television, and all of these elements that shape our ways of engaging with the world. What happens when we bridge those together and understand media not just as a tool for managing our social relationships, but also generative, creating relationships that otherwise would have no way of existing. We'll be doing some writing, reflection, and analysis to understand and engage in our environment. I'm going to ask you to think about whether or not you choose to use media actively yourself, how this environment that we find ourselves in, constant exposure and engagement with media, shapes our world. Assessing the information and doing that critical evaluation. One thing I love about working with Lewis and Clark students is, we are critical and skeptical of the information that's put in front of us. And doing that, when we're looking at whether it's an interview or a variety of reports talking about media, something that we'll be doing in this class. And then toward the end of the class, you all will have the chance to teach and engage with us on issues that you care about or are interested in that connect to these ideas of interpersonal media that we'll be going over the course of the semester. It'll be great. So I want to give a quick overview on my background and experience. So a number of you either are sticking around for my RHMS Year 1 class or taking a class with me in fall. Also a lot of new folks that I'm really excited to get to know and meet over the course of the semester. So you're welcome to call me Ben. The probably most interesting fact, because I'm trying not to be a boring millennial whose only personality trait is they own an air fryer, is that I actually went to Lewis and Clark, and I was exactly on the other side of this room. In fact, I had an international affairs class with Dr. Cyrus Karkovi in this room. So it's a little bit of a trip being here on the other side. I grew up in the Portland area, and I did my undergrad at Lewis and Clark as an English major. I was going to be an English and political science double major. I did all the things. I took 8 a.m. econ with Cliff Becker, and then when I was in my senior capstone, which was a cross-listed law class with Todd Lochner, I missed too much class, and he kicked me out. I still graduated, still got the English major, but perhaps rightly so. It's a cautionary tale in managing your boundaries and knowing your limits. So I really have loved teaching and working with students. For the longest time, I thought I was going to be a high school English teacher, but a couple things happened. First of all, in high school and all throughout college, I really fell in love with speech and debate. So I competed on the team all 4 years at Lewis and Clark, and I'm also a coach with the speech and debate team. We've got a tournament this weekend out in Forest Grove. And also, I kind of realized that while I enjoy working with high school students, I do find the idea of exploring elements of communication, of advocacy, of how we advocate on issues we care about. I was really interested in persuasive and informative speaking. Those things got me really excited. So when I was at nationals for my senior year, I get a message inviting me to get a master's in communication and join the speech and debate team at the University of the Pacific. So after graduating, I went down I-5 and got my master's at the University of the Pacific. In my master's program, I worked on and did a lot of work pertaining to trans representation in media and how LGBT+ identity is depicted via representation and depictions that we see on TV and film. And I decided, you know what? I want to put off being a human and living in the real world even longer. And what better way to do that than continue to go to grad school? So I decided to get a PhD, and this time I went on I-84 over to University of Utah. I graduated in 2020, which was a trip. I did not walk, and I had a bit of a wild job market. So after doing a postdoc in Utah for a year, I had the chance to worked for a couple of years at Eastern Oregon University in La Grande, Oregon, which is a small town of 13,000, again, down I-84. So I worked there for 2 years. I had a really great opportunity working with a lot of rural and first-generation students. I think that, if you have lived in Oregon for a minute, you know that there's a pretty big divide between sort of the western and eastern side of the state. But I did learn a lot about the experiences facing a lot of rural students out there. It's also very cool and very treacherous out there in the wintertime, even more so than here. And there was an opportunity to come back to Lewis and Clark, where my family lives. The thing about academia that I wish I knew before I really considered going down this path is that you oftentimes do not get to choose your location at all. I have a lot of people who live a lot of very difficult places for them for the sake of the job. So I consider myself extremely lucky to do what I love, where I love. And so since this past fall, I've been working here at Lewis and Clark. So I teach a lot of different courses this semester. Right before I teach rhetorical criticism. I also teach an intro course, and I teach classes including rhetorical theory. I'm really excited because next spring I'm going to be teaching a special topics course about disability rhetoric in media. So if that's of interest to you, I'm happy to chat further about it. I have done the loop, and I'm back here. So a lot of my research background and interests, so I do a lot of work looking at disability and neurodiversity rhetoric. as well as marginality in media. So for example, I've been looking at social movements and advocacy online. In this class, I'm going to be sharing a more contemporary piece that I wrote looking at the use of the term neurospicy on TikTok and Twitter and how that's used as a way of exploring and generating identity. I do a lot of work in critical health and science communication, so I have a lot of crossover with Dr. Dana Goldsmith. Again, as mentioned, do some work in speech and debate. I'm also a human being and actually have a life outside of the office, although work-life balance oftentimes goes out the window. So this is my dog, Sylvie. She's a Labrador Retriever, and Sylvie's thing is that she will get massive branches, like you can't even call them sticks anymore, they're huge. She'll get these massive branches and she will drag them for like miles and miles and miles. And she will wiggle and get so excited if she ever sees somebody, not because she wants them to have the stick, throw the stick, she just wants to like show it off to them and see their like affective reactions. So she's great. We have a lot of fun. She like walks the trail, and I have to apologize to people all the time. It's fine. My big hobby in my free time is I do independent video game design. So I've had a project I've been working on for the past few years. If you are a fan of either the Fire Emblem or Persona series, it's kind of a mashup of those two. It doesn't have graphics, it's still like a prototype, but I like to work on it in my free time. It's a lot of fun. And I also love live music. So, I've been to a few shows, looking forward to some this next year as well, weather permitting. Saw a few like Mountain Goats and We Go to the Devil over the summer, and I'm excited to be somewhere with a lot more live music. So, those are some fun things that I like to do. Since I was a graduate here, I like to give just a few pieces of advice on things I wish I knew when I was an undergrad here. The first thing that I would really recommend, right, in teaching here over the fall, it's kind of like a slightly loose rope. It's the experience of seeing how a semester is gone. For a lot of us, we're really excited. We're up here when the semester begins, right? We are raring to go. And then we like overexert ourselves. And there's this moment, like, when the moment hits. It's like 6, maybe 7 weeks into the semester where the semester hits you like a truck. You're exhausted, you're overstretched, you've got a ton of things to do, you feel really behind, people are getting sick, right? There's that middle phase of the semester where the rope just goes in. Then at the end of the semester, we come back up and like people will like compile all of the assignments that they've been missing, kind of like throw it all together in a garbage bag and say, here we go, here's my assignments, bye, hope I passed. So I recognize that experience can happen for a lot of people. What I encourage is to try to rein yourself in and try to keep things feeling reasonable. One thing that I like to do is to really try to keep the assignment in the course as reasonable as possible, so that one, you always know what to expect in the course in terms of assignments that are coming up that are due. 2, to offer extensions to people who request them in advance and let me know that they need more time, especially if they have bottlenecks, because you have other classes. Believe it or not, right? This is not your only class. It's not the only important class, right? And also that, there's opportunities to give you some break in time. So for instance, you not have a reading assignment on, the day before you would need to submit a written assignment for the course. So pacing yourself and trying to keep the assignments of the course reasonable so that you know what to expect is really important to me. Secondarily, again, it's a weird experience being a graduate from Lewis and Clark because, I got a C+ in a Japanese class with a professor who's now the dean of our college. And I'm like, hi, I work here. Also, I didn't do very well in your class, right? Like, I deal with a lot of that, feeling of, oh no, what does it mean? And, most of the folks, rightfully so, because the number of people they work with don't really remember me, but great. I'm not going to bring it up. However, right, I know a lot of times we associate our value as humans with the grades that we receive. And I really want to emphasize that, I do not look at you all with letter grades over your grades. You could be a phenomenal human being, great person, and get a D in class, right? Those things are true. And so what I really value and appreciate, one thing that I've learned from a lot of students is that we're getting much better at creating boundaries with work about doing the work that we're paid to do and nothing more, right? Respecting those boundaries. And at the same time, our boundaries as students too, right? Not all of us are going to be here to necessarily get an A in the class and like, really go the extra mile and do everything possible, right? That's okay. What your goals and what your relationship looks like to this class, the ceiling is high, you can push yourself, right? But what you are looking for and hoping to get out of the class is what you put in. So, it's not about, overstretching you or creating a difficult situation or assessing you as a human based on the grades that you use. And also, right, we're always already becoming. A lot of you are sophomores, juniors. We are trying out different classes, doing new things. That's one thing that's amazing about the college experience. Is like, go take a weird classics class, right? Like, do something that gets you out of your comfort zone. And that's part of what makes this experience really fun. For Wednesday's class, I am going to ask that you take some time to review the syllabus and schedule for the course. I'm going to go over a couple quick highlights for you, though, as you start to prepare and think about the material in those, so that we can get into that in more detail as we get into our next class. So we are live on Moodle now, and if you go to the Moodle page for the course, you'll see both the syllabus and the course schedule. So the course syllabus just goes over a lot of things to know about the class, including meeting time. For my office hours, I have them 9 to 10. I'm always in the office for those times, as well as Wednesday from 2 to 4, but those are not the times that I'm only available. If this does not line up with your schedule, let me know, send me some times you might like to meet, and I'm happy to meet with you outside of it. You have one reading, textbook in the course, the main reading that should be available through the bookstore. Everything else is available for you to access on Moodle. And we'll be asked to start to use that reading early on in the class. We've talked about a lot of the things that we'll be going over in the course, as well as some of the goals that we have in the course as well. Some of the course policies, including COVID-19 policies. I, of course, am really committed to OSA accommodations, supporting students who need additional help. Let me know, right, if you're needing help and resources in order to do well, and I want to help to meet you there, right? I would much rather have you come and ask for help than say, help, the fire has burned down the building. So at the end of the semester, you'll be able to complete a reflection that discusses your work in the class and whether or not you feel that that represents the letter grade. I know grades have a lot of social and cultural disparities, so I want to take into account the experience and work that you all have had as a student in the course. You can submit rough drafts and outlines of assignments if you would like, as we're working through them as well. So in the class, we'll talk more about some of these assignments as the semester continues, but I'm going to be circulating a Google form for discussion leading, in which you alone or with a partner will essentially get us started in the class and use some time in the beginning of class to raise some discussion questions, like I did in the beginning with the video, right? To get us thinking about and engaging in the topic for the day. That way, you're not hearing my voice all the time, and we have the chance to connect with one another. If you're not feeling great about presentations, it's not a big speech. It is a chance for you to work, ideally with a partner who might be like that for you in working together. Your weekly written assignments are reflections that are asking you to engage with the readings and your own thoughts on personal media. Your first reflection is already available for you on Moodle, and it's going to be due this Sunday. It's not a big formal essay. Rather, it's asking you to connect some of these readings and ideas over the semester. For the 2 essays in the course, you'll receive the prompts for those at least 2 weeks before the deadline on those assignments. They'll be connected to those different parts of the semester. And then at the end of the class, you'll be working in small groups to investigate a topic, a case study that's of interest to you that relates to these ideas that we've talked about in the class on interpersonal media. Perhaps it's about a new algorithm or way in which, someone has issued an apology online or created an algorithmically designed chatbot or something like that. So you'll have the chance to explore some of these ideas toward the end of the semester as we did. The other thing that I want to direct you to that's also available for you on Moodle is the course schedule. I promise, I will never add assignments into the course. So there's not like a sudden assignment that comes out that's like due the week that you have to do. All of this is available for you. You can use a planner, Google Calendar, whatever you like. The only thing I might change is to make things easier or more reasonable for you as needed. So you'll see topic, the readings for those days. Again, those readings and material are available for you to access on Moodle as well. So for Wednesday, the reading is available on Moodle. It's the Wrench piece on interpersonal communication. Not a long assignment, but it's asking you to connect to some of those ideas. So before next class, please take time to look over that reading and start to think about interpersonal communication and its relationship to media. The last thing is I have an entrance survey that I'm gonna ask you to take on your way out. And if you can bring that into me in class on Wednesday, this will just give me some notes on your experience as a student and ways that I can support you in your learning. If you are on the wait list, please, or not registered for the course, please stick around for a quick minute so we can chat. Otherwise, have a fantastic rest of your day. Yes, Elizabeth? So if you are in my other class, that's one for. Awesome. Have a great rest of your first day. Awesome to meet you all, and I really look forward to getting into stuff next class.
Thank you.
I was. Oh my gosh,
So,
my goodness.
the max I can have in the week, but, go down the order we've had it, and I know that there's a couple drops, and I will also do increase in that. So, not the way, I'm gonna follow up with the one you said. Whatever extent I can. What I'll do. That doesn't work, I can do it again. Okay. So, I will add like a series of other things. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right, we chatted for a minute. I love that. Yes, so, yeah, I got those marked down and I'll give you as soon as I got it. Thank you. Yeah. So, you prefer. Well, so again, I'm just trying to here, there's not the clearest picture that I can. It's all followed up about how it water. Here, no serious. That's good. Yeah, I'm yeah. Other things that I'm doing on this, everything is called release. Yeah, that's good. It's good. Yeah. Kind of like I said, I did the task that getting folks marked down. I will let you know as soon as I can. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. I had a speech and debate about this. Oh, yeah, that's classic. The next one. Yeah. Yes. So I did in high school like that, and we do manage stuff here, so I've been really book. Yeah, but I was wondering if there's like a certain point at which you join the semester, or you can just kind of. Yeah. Well, that's Joe about. Yeah, I'll let Joe be the inquiry on that. I will take it to our team is very much and get to choose what you want to put into it and how much you want to travel and so you can do. You also are going to have a lot of things that you can observe, like practice rounds and stuff. So like our first practice of the semester is 6:30 tonight. So it's probably gonna check in with me about that. Yeah. But no, it's really cool. We got to do a lot of different formats and like, We do a lot of different things that also like, kind of meets you where you're at. Too.
That's so cool. Yeah, I was just curious, you know, oh my gosh, I sat in one of the practices.
Oh,
here, that's what then that before I was in bands.
Yeah.
And then I did that, I was like, oh, no.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Definitely check. We'll be able to. Maybe work with the IT. Yeah. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna get some, you're fascinating, talking about, yeah, I don't mind my being on that. It's so, well,
Yeah, awesome. Oh, yeah, great to meet you. Yeah, it's awesome. Great to meet you, and hope things go well. Looks like you're taking it.
Is everyone there? I'm gonna do like. Hi, people. Yo también. No,